Julia, welcome back to my channel. So, new setup. I was encountering some like weird lighting issues with my old setup, so I decided to try something new today just to see what would happen. I don't know if I'm gonna stick with it or whatever. Just let me know, do you like this setup? Because I don't know, it's extra, but I'm into it. Today I want to bring you guys a video synthesizing all my favorite eyeshadow tips and tricks. Eyeshadow is like one of my favorite items of makeup. I love doing eyeshadow looks, very bold, very colorful things. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram to see my makeup looks that I post. But today I wanted to create a very colorful, bold eyeshadow look with you guys on screen while sharing with you guys some of my favorite tips to get that look. So I'm using the Paradise palette by Joy Cosmetics. I just reviewed this one in my new makeup releases, favorites and fails for September. So you guys can see my full like review of the quality of this palette. I wanted to pick this one because it's very, very pigmented. I'll show you guys like swatches so you can see just how bright and pigmented they are. And sometimes very colorful, very pigmented shades like these ones can be a little bit like scary to work with at first, but with some tips and tricks, I think it's very easy to kind of master doing colorful eyeshadow looks. And I wanted to share with you guys some of my favorite tips that I've kind of learned over the past couple months. This video is kind of a part 2 to a video I did a couple of months ago where I shared 10 eyeshadow tips and tricks that I really love doing. And of course, I still use all those tips, but these are just some new ones that I've kind of learned in my past couple of months of doing makeup. I'm constantly learning and constantly trying out new things. I'm always like willing to learn new techniques and stuff, and I'm always just getting better at makeup and improving my craft. So every now and then I just figure it's a fun thing to do and just sit down and talk to you guys about some new tips, tricks, and just techniques I like. By the way, we have a new friend. His name is Bob. He's just staying on my chin. He's been there for about 5 days now. I hate him. Don't mind Bob. Hopefully he's temporary. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the eye look that I created, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first step in any eye look for me is eyelid primer, and I'm going to use my normal one, Urban Decay Primer Potion in the shade Fix. But something I've recently started doing with my eyelid primer is actually like blending it out. I don't usually set my eyelid primer, especially if I'm working with more colorful shadows, because the less you like set down your eyelid primer, the more it's going to like stick down to the wet base and just kind of make everything more intense. So I don't usually set down my eyelid primer, but what I do I'll actually leave it wet and then like leave it to sit there for about 1 to 2 minutes after I've applied it. That way it can kind of dry down and be a little bit more matte, so that things will blend a bit easier on top of it, but it'll still get that nice pigmentation. So that's a really good medium if you find your shadows are going patchy on top of a wet eyelid primer. I would say just let it dry for about 1 to 2 minutes until it's like not quite as tacky anymore, and then go ahead and go in with your eyeshadow. Alright, so that is the primer on, and I'm going to leave it there for about 1 to 2 minutes to let it dry down before I go in with my eyeshadows. Alright, so now I'm going to start the eye look, and for today I'm going to be using the Joy Cosmetics 18 Color Paradise Eyeshadow Palette. I talked about this in my last 2 videos. I figured this would be a good palette to use today because I am going for a very colorful look, just to demonstrate all my colorful eye look tips. But of course these tips can apply to like using neutral eyeshadows as well. These are just things I do whenever I do eyeshadow, and normally when I'm doing eyeshadow it's like brown. So regardless of what you like to do with your makeup, I think these tips will be able to help you in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully. I'm going for a bit of a tropical blue look today. So the first shade I'm going to go into is the shade here. This is just a bright cobalt matte blue, and I'm going to be using my Glamour Dolls number 10 brush. Especially when I'm doing colorful looks, I usually don't use a transition shade. So that's my tip number 2, is to like forego a transition shade every now and then if you're doing a more colorful look. The reason I do this is because I really like having bright shocks of pigmentation in my colorful looks. And sometimes using too many colors can kind of dilute the color concentration of certain shades. So usually I'll just go straight in with my crease shade. And I'm going straight in with that blue and just kind of packing it on into the crease and then blending it out in small increments. As you can see, this is very, very pigmented. I love these shadows because they are extremely high in pigmentation. I'll show you guys swatches so you can see just how
literally so pigmented
they are, but with these tips, I feel like you're able to make them even more pigmented than how they show up in swatches. A lot of shadows out there really do swatch amazingly, but then it's hard to get that kind of color payoff onto your eyes. But these are ways I've found to make my shadows pop and just make my eye looks really bright and vibrant. I'm just taking a clean blending brush now and just kind of diffusing out the edges of that blue shadow. This is a tip that I mentioned in my last eyeshadow tips video, where you just kind of take a clean blending brush and just run it over the edges of the shadow to blend it out even further. And of course I'm holding all my brushes at the end. That's just the best to getting really good control and just letting the brush do the work rather than like really forcing the eyeshadow on there, which I find can make the eyeshadow look very harsh or just look like shitty. The funny thing is though, I find that when I'm doing eyeshadow when I'm very, very stressed out, it never really turns out the way I want it to, because I'm like usually holding the brush with a very tense grip. I'm holding it at the front of the brush and I'm just like not taking my time and making sure that everything is smooth and blended out. I'm just kind of like, come on, let's go. So yeah, it sounds stupid, but another tip that I have for you guys is to just kind of like relax. When you're doing your eyeshadow and when you're doing your makeup in general, it'll come out a lot softer looking, I feel like, and it looks better. So just calm down. And while I'm doing the other eye with blue, I'm gonna give you guys my fourth tip, which is don't mix cool tones and warm tones. And I've seen some really pretty looks before that have mixed cool tones and warm tones. Obviously there's no rules to makeup, you can kind of do whatever you want, but for me, when I'm doing colorful eye looks, I just don't like the way cool tones and warm tones look together. They can kind of get muddy. So an example of this would be like, I've seen some people do like blue eye looks where they put orange in the crease. And sometimes it looks cool. On me, it looks terrible. Just as a rule of thumb though, if you are new to eyeshadow, I would say keep your cool tones and warm tones separate because it's a lot easier to kind of theorize looks and just kind of create a more cohesive look if you're using tones in the same color story. So for today's look, I wanted to stick to a very cohesive kind of tropical color story. So I'm doing blue in the crease, and then I'm doing green and kind of goldish yellow on the lid. Is it going to be bold? Yes, but it's also going to be a cohesive color story. Something I think would not be cohesive would be like mixing gray and red. Actually, that'd be kind of badass. Never mind. But usually, just as a rule of thumb, I try and keep cool tones with other cool tones and try to keep warm tones with other warm tones. So for example, if I'm doing a brown look, I probably won't use like a cool tone taupe brown with a very warm chestnut brown. That just won't look very cohesive, if that makes sense. That performed so beautifully. I love how this blue blends out and everything. So I'll zoom you guys in so you can see what the eye look is looking like so far, but I really enjoy how that blended out and just looked super pigmented. Next, I want to deepen up my outer V of my eye, and I actually don't have a darker blue shade in here, which I would ideally use for a blue look, but I do have a black in here. So my next tip is actually to kind of like finesse things and create new shadows in the palette that you don't already have. So I'm actually going to mix together my own like darker navy blue by mixing the medium blue matte and the black. Going in with a nice fluffy detailed brush. This is the e.l.f. Detail Crease Brush. I'm going to go a tiny bit into black and then go into blue. Always go into the black first before you go into the color, because then the first layer that shows up on your eye will be the color and not the black. And then I'm just gonna very carefully, very delicately, just pack it on in the outer corner. So what I'm doing is actually doing a pack and blend motion, and this is one of my favorite things to do for colorful eye looks. Instead of just like immediately going in and blending, which is gonna just make all the color disappear, I like to pack on the color first and then lightly blend out the edges, and this will create the like highest amount of color concentration. So as you can see, stamping on that black in the outer corner, it's kind of taking on this dark blue look, and I'm just kind of packing it on, not really blending. And now that I've gotten a sufficient amount of color down and I don't have a ton of color left on my brush, I'm just gonna kind of, sorry, this is like eyeshadow's post-verbal at this point. I'm very bad at describing things. And when I'm working with black, but just kind of any shadow in general, I'm being very soft, and I'm kind of like barely even touching the eye, just grazing it with the brush. And this will ensure that everything looks very soft. Again, taking a clean blending brush and just using that to diffuse the outer edges. And see, we've got that nice kind of diffused fade into a darker shade. That just brings some intensity to the outer corner and makes everything look more, you know what I mean.
No.
Just gonna do the other side now, and then my tip number 6 probably?
That is not correct.
I'm not keeping track, is to use dense brushes. So obviously the last brush I used, which was this Detail Glamour Dolls 10 brush, it's a very small like blending brush, so it has a nice density to it, but it's also kind of fluffy, so it's gonna pack on the color but also be able to blend it out. When I'm doing colorful looks, I usually use very like densely packed brushes that still have a little bit of fluffiness to them, so that they can kind of like pack on the most pigmentation for the color. So for shades that you don't want to be very like slight wash in the crease or something, and you want like very full pigmentation, use a denser brush. It's just going to pick up more product, more pigmentation, and just deposit it better, I guess. So yeah, dense brushes are the way to go if you're doing a colorful eye look, and that is the next tip. But as you can see, I don't think these shadows really need that much help. As you can see, that created the most beautiful navy blue shade from a shade that we didn't even have in this palette. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have like a colorful palette where you're like, this doesn't have every single shade I need, kind of play around, look at the shades you do have, and then see if you can create something out of the shades by mixing some certain shades. It doesn't always work, but usually with like darker shades like a black, you can kind of mix and match different shades to create different intensities of what you want. So I really love how that performed, and those two blended together so well. damn. Sometimes I really just like impress myself. Before I move on though, I do want to give another tip that I usually do when I'm using darker shades in the outer corner is I actually put down a wet base so that they stick down better. This is something I did in my last Get Ready With Me, so I'll link that in the cards above so you can see that kind of technique in action. Today, I don't think the navy blue shadow that I created needed it, so that's another thing. If it has enough depth to it, you don't necessarily need to do it, but if you want to bring that extra level of intensity, take a little bit of wet base, whether it be like concealer, whatever I use to cut my crease, or even some more eyeshadow primer. I'll just put that down wherever I want to create a very nice dark shadow, and then I'll just kind of pat on the shadow on top of that, and it just creates this beautiful intense look. So that's a tip that I got from Nikki Tutorials. She always does really, really beautiful intense color payoff eyeshadow looks, so I was very inspired when I saw the technique. I've been using it for a couple months, so I'm not going to do it today, but if you're wanting a bit more intensity in the outer corner, go ahead and put down a little bit of like wet base when you go in with a very, very dark shadow. Normally it has to be like almost black or dark like navy blue, maybe a dark purple. It works amazingly, so that's another tip, I guess. But now I will zoom you guys in so you can see the eye look as it is right now. All right, so now it's time to do the cut crease. I already did it on the side because I'm impatient. But my favorite tip for doing a cut crease is using a flat shader brush. So what I like to do when I'm doing my cut creases is I kind of just like stamp it on. And I usually like to work with the actual shape of the brush. So because this flat shader brush has a rounded shape to it, you can kind of just like work with the actual shape, and instead of like dragging your brush, you stamp it on. Just work with the natural shape and it'll kind of create the cut crease for you. You really don't have to do all the work when you're going with some good brushes. As you can see, I'm just kind of stamping it on, and then the natural curve of the brush is creating the perfect cut crease for me. So very, very easy in theory. It kind of takes some mastering to actually get this to work all the time. Sometimes my hand is like too shaky to actually do it, but that's usually when I'm really anxiety riddled, which is all the time. Anxiety.
Coming soon to a dank river valley near you.
So yeah, just using the natural shape of the brush and letting that do the work for me instead of like dragging to create the perfect cut crease, it was able to create this beautiful, perfect oval on top of my crease without doing too much work. So that's one of my favorite like cut crease techniques, is just kind of stamping and letting the natural shape of the brush do the work for you. So I could stop here. I think it's actually really pretty as just a purely blue look, and I think the shadows did a really, really great job creating this look, but I want to use more shadows in here. And you know what? I was inspired to kind of full send it today and not just do blue, so I want to go with even more colors on the lids, and I'm actually going to use three more colors on the top, and then we might have some fun on the bottom as well. So now I want to go into the yellow, and I'm just going to pack that onto the inner corner. Again, it's a very dense brush. This is the Morphe Y22. So packing on this bright like canary yellow in the inner corner. And as you can see, the wet base is really helping it to create this beautiful like flush. Using a wet base for the cut crease really intensifies and brightens the shadows on top of it, so that's another tip. Like, these shadows don't really need that much help. I probably should have like selected a less great quality palette for this video, but still, I think the like wet base really does help to intensify anything that you put on top of it. Next, with the same brush, I'm going to use this like lime green shade here. Something I really like to do when I'm doing colorful looks is instead of just going straight from this yellow to this green, I use like an intermediate shade that's kind of in between the two. So like if I was doing pink to orange, I would use like a peach shade like this to kind of merge the two together, and just putting that shade down in between the other two really helps to create a nice even gradient blend. Whereas if I put down a very dark green shade next to bright yellow shade and tried to blend those two together, it would look a little bit less like cohesive, I guess. So yeah, using intermediate shades can really help. Pink between red and purple and stuff like that. So just use common sense when you're doing that, of course, but I think it's a really pretty effect, and it can really help to make the whole look. And then finally, again with that same brush, I'm going to go into the green. You'll notice I used the same brush for all these lid shades, and that's actually something I like doing. It's not just because I'm lazy. I mean, it is a little bit because I'm lazy, but sometimes if I'm doing colorful looks like this, I'll actually use the same brush for multiple shades. That just really helps to blend everything together, because you do have a little bit of residual shadow on that one brush, and then that just kind of helps to merge different colors together. So for these lid shades, because they are packed so like closely together on the eye, I like having that extra effect of just like extra blendation. That's not a word.
LOL, when you're literally a published author and you have no grip on the English language whatsoever.
That's all the matte lid shades I want to do, and I'm just going to go back into that like detailed crease brush, take a little bit of blue and just stamp it right between the navy blue and the green to just merge everything together. Alright, so that is what it's looking like on the top of the lids. And now I actually want to go in with a little bit of shimmer as well. But I'm realizing that the yellow is kind of looking a tiny bit like lime greenish, and I want it to look more like yellow. So you know what that means, we have to use gold. So I'm actually going to use the gold shade in here. I'm excited to show you guys how the shimmers perform in here because as you can see, the mattes perform pretty well. I would compare the quality of these shadows to like Juvia's Place. I feel like they're very bold, very bright, and very highly pigmented, but they still have that nice like blendability, and they're not like super powdery or anything. So really good matte formula. I've used the shimmer formula a couple times as well. I would say it's decent. So I'm just gonna take a flat shader brush. This is the Morphe M421. I'm just gonna spray it, get it nice and wet. Be great if planes could stop flying over my house. And then going in with the gold, just gonna pat it on top of where I put my yellow. A lot of the time when I'm doing shimmer shades, I like to put them down on top of a color that I already have down, just to kind of like intensify them, especially if I'm going for a bit more of a sheer effect. I want to have that similar shade underneath that to kind of marry everything. So just patting this gold on. This isn't necessarily like an eye tip, it's just kind of like I wanted to use gold today, so I'm using gold today. Alright, so that is what we're working with the gold. And when I'm doing shimmer shades on the lid, again, this is not really necessarily a part of this eye look, but something I like to do is I kind of do a gradient of shimmers. So I'll do like a little demo right now. I'm going to go into the white shade as well, the white shimmer. Just kind of pat that on the very innermost corner of the eye. This is going to bring some highlight to it, but also I'm blending it in with the gold to kind of create a like nice gradient shimmer effect. So it kind of goes from white to gold to the rest of the lid shades, and it just kind of makes everything a bit more cohesive. So whether I'm doing it on the inner corner to the very innermost corner of the lid, or if I'm just doing it all across the lid, I like creating a nice gradient of shimmers. Everything look nice and bright. And then clearly this white shade needs like no help in terms of pigmentation. I really like how this white shade is performing. The gold was okay. Wow.
Wow.
Finally, something I really like doing just to kind of highlight the beauty of all the shadows is to add on a little bit of glitter to the high points. So this is something I like to do if I'm wearing a shimmer shade and I just want a little bit more like BAM! And I just want a little bit more brightness. I'll go in with some glitter. So I'm just gonna use a bit of this one. Can't Mold Me Down. If you know from the last video, you know the joke. I'm just adding the tiniest bit of glitter, not to kind of take away from the eye look, just to kind of add to it and enhance everything. Of course though, you don't have to add glitter. It was pretty without the shimmer shade. It was pretty without the glitter. Just do whatever suits you. If you want to keep it an all matte look, you absolutely can. Just something I like to do is just to bring a little bit extra dimension to the shimmer shades and just make them pop a bit more. And adding a tiny bit of chunky or fine glitter, even if you're adding a very small amount like I am right now, just kind of brings some extra brightness to the look. Alright, so now we are in the end, near the home stretch of the eye look. I'm just going to finish off the lower lash line. So first, I want to go into the blue, and again, we're doing that kind of right near the lower lash line. Taking that Y22 and going into the green again. And then let's finish it off, full send it, and go with the yellow shade. Alright, so that is the completed eyeshadow. I'm just going to go pop on some mascara and some lashes, and now I can finish off the video. What's missing? Brow bone highlight. I'm gonna go into the white shade here. Ugh, so pretty. Alright guys, so here's the completed eye look with all my eyeshadow tips and tricks. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was actually pretty fun for me to film, and I love sharing with you guys like some educational tips and tricks and stuff. I hope this answered some of the questions that I often get on my Instagram of like how I create the eye looks I do. And I just had a really fun time just talking, chatting with you guys, even though it's a one-sided conversation that I'm talking to my camera about. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, don't, I guess. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and also make sure you follow me down below on Instagram to see eye looks like this one posted almost every single day. Thank you guys for all your love and all the support you guys give me. It really does mean the whole entire world. And if you made it to the very end of this video, I love you. Thank you so much for watching this channel.